Everyone, this is Eric with Nutrition by Eric. I hope you're doing well. Today, I'd like to speak with you about Israel. It is the land that my father was born in, and I'd like to share some of the dynamics, what I've seen growing up with an Israeli father who served in the military, like everybody who's there over the age of 18, and some things I've learned from him and from my own research. So. First of all, if you don't know, today is October 16th, and there was an incident that happened in the Gaza Strip about a week ago at a festival very close to the Gaza border, kind of a dangerous area. But nevertheless, you've probably heard that Hamas, and there's a chet. A chet is the one of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet, so it's usually pronounced Hamas, as far as I know. And you hear in the news Hamas, but that's just one thing. There's a lot of ch sounds in the Hebrew language, and that's one word that has it. Not to be confused with the Arabic sound of hard ha. I don't know too much Arabic, but they have a hard H versus our chet, like in challah, which is a bread. So, so my father was born in Israel in 1944. And yes, technically, it wasn't even called Israel at that time. I just watched a video with Ben Shapiro, and he explained a lot of history, how the state was called, it's such a small country, it's called sometimes a state. But there's a nice video by Ben Shapiro who explains why it was called Palestine, and there's there's a whole history behind that, and how, like many areas in the world, it's fought over. People don't come in and say, "I'd like this land," and people just say, "Oh, sure, go ahead, take it, it's yours." Or if you go back far enough, I'm sure you could go to a land that no one occupied to say, well, we like it here, it's ours, we're going to take it. Think of the U.S. When the British came over, they didn't come to a uninhabited country, which I'm in now. It was inhabited by the Native Americans, and this is life. This is history. They said, "No, this is a nice place. We'd like it." And as far as I know, I wasn't there, but Indian said, "Well, no, we don't like this idea." So wars are fought, and people die. Lots of people die, and then they're not forgotten, but this is a history. You've heard the term probably divide and conquer. And but I digress. The idea is that there's a war right now, and this is such a contemptuous. What is the word? It's such a hot topic. Israel and the root of Christianity. This is not just some middle of nowhere place. This is a small place geographically, but it has such a historical significance. So, I thought you might be interested in hearing, maybe coming to a conclusion that you don't have to pick a side. You don't have to say I stand for Israel or Palestine. I'm obvious. I'm biased by my nationality. So I'm half Israeli, half American. My mom is from Israel. My dad is from. Sorry, my mom is American. My dad's from Israel. Yeah, and he was born there. His father came there from Poland. It was a thing to do in the 30s, 1930s, about 100 years ago, 90 years ago. They just, let's go to a place that is our historical birthright. There's a lot of history. The Hebrew calendar is in 5700s. We're at almost 6,000 years of recorded history. I think that's the longest. The Chinese calendar is probably, they have probably 5,000 plus years, but that's a long time to have a record of history. I haven't read it all, but it's a long time. So my dad was born. So my dad's parents, they met. They were both from the same place in Poland, and they said, hey, they met up, and they ended up. As from what I know, they got together with others, and they said, okay, we're going to pick a place to live. And And they did, and that is like it's a commune. It's called a kibbutz, and they decided to choose an area, actually in the south, not too far, probably about an hour and a half drive from the Gaza Strip, and they kibbutz gat is what it was called, and they created kind of like a commune, like I guess anybody did. When you start off and you say we're going to live someplace, you don't have much. You start off in tents. You don't have the electric company to come roll out right away, and eventually, things became more modern for them, and having running water, and I don't know all the dynamics. It's I actually have a cassette of an interview with my grandfather that I had to get turned into an MP3 or something, and translated from Hebrew. But so my dad went to the army at age 18. You're man and woman, male or female rather, has to go to the army. That's the law, like in other countries. So that was in the 60s, and my dad was enlisted and conscripted, whatever the word is, and brought into the army. And then they had to select who's going to be an officer. So my dad made that cut. He was chosen to become an officer and a lieutenant. And then quite toward the end of his life, I learned he was actually a second lieutenant, which is even another promotion. And during this, I'm just going to close something. My computer's running a little slow. Okay, hopefully that speeds it up, keeps it from buffering. So, when Israel was declared a state, immediately there was resistance from. If you look at the map, Israel is kind of on the ocean on the west part, and then to the north is Lebanon, and to the southwest is Egypt, and then Jordan to the east, and there's a couple more I can't remember off the top of my head. But immediately there was not a welcome wagon, so to speak, that said, "Oh, great, welcome." It was imagine going from a crisis of the World War II, the Holocaust, to I'll pause here before I forget. Let's think numbers. I'm a numbers guy, and studying engineering and all. Think of the world population. Right now it's about 7 or 8 billion people. It's a lot of people. That's the whole, in the US we have 350 million. We're 5% of the world population. So all the Jews in the world currently are about 14 million, maybe a little more. This is a number from about a year or two ago. So that, if you think math, most people do know who Jews are, but that's, see if you can guess before I tell you, what is the percentage of the world population of all the Jews, 14 million, out of 7 to 8 billion people? Did you get it? It's 0.2%, 0.2%, 1/5. It's 2/10, which is 1/5 of 1%. That's a really small amount. So, and about half that is in Israel, and the other half is all over the world. So in Israel, probably about 7 million people. Is Jews, that is. So I don't know the whole population of Israel, because you've got Christians and Muslims, and a very interesting ancient group called the Druze, Druze, or Zi. And but I bring all this up to say, back to, whose side are you on? The Palestinians. It was called Palestine. If you look on the map, you dodo. I've seen people say that. In 1947 and beyond, it says Palestine, so it's not Israel. Well, there were disputes of land, here in the U.S., the state of Texas was Texans, and then it was Mexicans, and Texans. It was a back and forth. Sometimes land is fought over, and it's, when one group has it, they call it what they want, and when some other group has it, it's what they want. But if you go back in history, there's a lot of presence of Jews there, and they were, successful in keeping the land for a while, and then they were unsuccessful, and then there's a back and forth. So it gets messy, and I'm not trying to convince you. I'm obviously biased. I feel, a tribal connection. Think of any group you're in. Hopefully, if you are connected to a group, whether you're Greek, or you're Muslim, or you're Buddhist, or you're in a softball league, or you play cards, or baseball, or you're a musician, you feel kind of a connection with that group if it's a good group. So you're kind of rooting for your group, whatever the category is. But I think it takes a little something to kind of look at, like if you want to say who's at fault here, whose land is it? The obviously terrorists are. I'll say obviously, but terrorists, as far as we know, they're pretty ruthless. They go in and kill men, women, children, and to be in the Israeli army, which is called the IDF, which stands for Israeli Defense Force. You have to fight fire with fire. You have to do some pretty what does it take to defend yourself? And how do you still be an honorable, kind human being while knowing you have a weapon and you have to defend? It's probably there's got to be a little bit of conflict at times. You're facing a group of people, and a lot of the people there are mostly, I'd say 90% of maybe I'm exaggerating, but there's a lot of groups, usually a small fringe minority, as what's his name, Justin Castro, I mean Trudeau would say, a fringe minority on his terms, but there's usually is. I'm not using it the way he uses it, but there's usually a small group that's usually the nut jobs, the extremists, and they have a lot of psychopathic tendencies, and they usually have a lot of power. Usually leaders are in small amounts. They're in the minority, but it's disproportionate amount of power. You may or may not agree with that, but that's just what I find. But anyways, it gets a little messy when you say, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. I've read things, shows fault. Have you ever been in a fight and you both are at fault? Think about that. You say, oh, well, you said this to me and I said that to you. And, oh, well, I did a lot of nice things for you. Yeah, and you did a lot of nice things for me. But, there's powder kegs. It's just part of the human condition, Groups of people. Sometimes it's over. I'm sure a lot of wars were started over a misunderstanding. Someone may have said something and misheard something, and tempers flare. So it takes a lot of work to kind of create peace. And a lot of people don't want peace. This is what I think it comes down to. There are groups who just don't want peace. I saw it where I saw they want to see the world burn. They want power, and they'll do whatever it takes. Dirty tricks. So, anyways, what can you do? Well, maybe this can kind of sum it up as regardless, you don't have to pick a side. You can say, well, there's good people everywhere. I've met Palestinians, not too many, but I've met, all right, at least one. He was going around with a Jewish guy and says, we're going to go around showing we can hang, we can get along. I saw a video recently of a guy. He was a Muslim. He was a Palestinian. He had a company, and his co-founder was Jewish. And I only saw a little bit of the video. So people are trying. People are trying to show you don't have to be A or B, and this is the polarity that is maybe part of human nature. You either say you're with us or you're against us. Now that may be good in sports. You pick your sports team. Either for this team or that team. You might not say in sports, oh, I want this team and that team. We're kind of brought up, and I'm just thinking, we're kind of brought up in a polarized way of thinking. You're either with us or against us. You want this team or that team. But whatever happened to unity? Whatever happened to, it's a dirty word for some people. They don't want to see that. But there's a power. Now, let me go off on a little bit of a esoteric tangent. We all put out kind of a vibe. We all put up an energy. And it's been measured. The cool thing is, there's a lot of things that are unseen in this world. I'm not just talking about like air and wind. Air and wind, you don't see them, but they're there, and you can scientifically prove them easier than other things like, your aura or your chakras, your energy centers, which are the same thing. So, but I think they're just as real. This is the kind of the great mystery of the world, that there are things that are unseen that really, I'd say, really have more precedent than the things that are seen. Okay? I mean, I don't know if anyone's had what they would call a religious experience or a spiritual, experience or a near-death experience. Some people have had those, and I've had certain, both good and bad experiences that have, I think, what you would call spiritual components. And yeah, they seem pretty darn real. It's like if you definitely know something goes on. I'm not talking about like drugs or anything, but sometimes in my sleep I see things or feel things. It's like it's not just a dream. There's something going on. So there's some terms like astral travel and astral projection. I don't know much about those, but I know that's possible in past lives and contracts and people. Let's say some person A killed person B in a past life, and then they come back and the other person kills the other person to kind of balance it out. I don't, I've even heard of a child that was someone that was killed. The killer was still large. A child was born and said, "I'm the reincarnated soul of the person that was killed," and that person confessed to the murder. Is it really true? There used to be a show when I grew up I used to love called That's Incredible, kind of like Ripley's Believe It or Not. I always thought that was so interesting. Yeah, when we have to get through life, and either you need a car or you don't need a car, or a job, and you've got to have a roof over your head, and you need all the things that are practical. Don't get me wrong, but the things that are, once you get your practicality out of the way, you can start to delve into the more esoteric things with practicality, with the lens of practicality, saying, "Oh, this stuff's pretty out there, but yeah, I think there's something to it." Okay, so I'm just looking at my notes here. There's so many analogies of what's going on, and I think again these behind the scenes groups that have a lot of control, have a lot of power. They know how to push people's buttons, like the mass of people. Again, so I asked earlier, what can you do? And each of us makes a difference. We all. I would like to bring up Dr. Joe Dispenza a lot, where he says your heart produces a magnetic field, and your brain puts out an electric field, and they're different. Electric field is different from a magnetic field. Even the wiring in your house, if you have modern electricity, electrical wires and outside of that, magnetic fields, I believe, come off of that. So putting it all together, you can do, one thing you can do is try to stay positive, try to stay neutral, as best you can. Meditate. I think meditation is so powerful. You just kind of sit, close your eyes, watch your breath, breathe through your nose. On the inhale, you can exhale again through your nose or out your mouth. That's the simplest way I can think to meditate. You either option A, in through the nose, and then out through the nose, or option B, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Usually it's not in through the mouth, out through the mouth, and it's usually not in through the mouth, out through the nose. Maybe some reasons there might be some yogic things that you might want to do that, or you might want to breathe really fast. That's kind of a yoga energizing breath. But for the by and large, if you just want to kind of clear your head, get a little, YouTube video of chanting or music, meditation music, or put on a timer and just breathe. You can just breathe in and out. You can be conscientious of the pause. You can breathe in and then have a little pause. You kind of hold your breath briefly and then breathe out. Start again. And or the other option is breathe in, hold it, breathe out, hold it again. Breathe in. So it's kind of like, you can have a 2-part breath where it's just in and out, 3-part where it's in, hold, out, or the 4-part breath. There we go. Got all 4 there. Where it's in, hold, out, hold. Get it? You can vary with the into the nose, out through the mouth, into the nose, out through the nose. So you got a lot to work with. You didn't even, and you're still on your chair or on your couch. So I find that, I guess, essential for me. I have to have it. Most days of the week. I may, I make you calm and tired. Excuse me. You know, I really, I really go a day without it now. I mean, the weekends I may not. If any days I skip it, it's usually the weekend. But it's kind of a go-to. I really don't feel myself. It's kind of like, you need a tune-up every day. Like a car needs a tune-up on occasion, but we all need a little bit of like tuning in to tune out the noise. And I find it's really helpful to do it when people are sleeping because we all kind of emit these frequencies, kind of like a Wi-Fi router emits Wi-Fi. I really do, I'm not the only one, but there is an effect of being around others, and when you're meditating, when everybody's around you awake, versus like 4 a.m. or something where most of the people, unless they all get up at 4 a.m., most people around you are asleep. And if everybody around you is up at 4 a.m., either you're in the military or you're in a monastery, hopefully a monastery or a monastic environment. So that's the good thing. You can do things and you can try to neutralize. Maybe you can be more rational, because a lot of people, oh my gosh, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be irrational. Yeah, I get it. There's a lot of, this is a day and age where it's so easy to record things. So yeah, there's a lot of brutality. There's a lot of recorded violence. I get it. I've cried. I've sat and just, I can't do anything for a while because I just saw someone from my dad's country. I literally saw them, something bad happened to them. Or I've read a story about a young man who, 19 years old, he jumped on a grenade, Who think anyone would have to do that, It's just like, I want to say it's just movie stuff, right? I want to say that only happens in a movie, or happened back in the old days, in the old wars, hundreds of years ago, or tens of years ago even. But yeah, this is just, it's hard to imagine. It's horrific, So there's still the humanity in all of us to try to, be compassionate, sympathetic, empathetic. Try to grasp like, how is this possible? That's why I really lean toward the East and the Buddhist teaching. They teach, kind of neutrality. I personally couldn't live with just being upset and, just, I don't know, just live with such anger, and just, because that ties in, that just, there's the whole concept of vibration, right? There's a high vibration, which is peaceful and positive and loving kindness to your fellow man and woman, and then there's the hatred of like, oh, this group did it, and then you get what happens is, anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism, anti-Muslim. Some group is picking on another person from that group to make them feel better, and that's look, I'm not saying we're all perfect. I mean, I'm sure, you know, Jews and Muslims and Christians and XYZ people that play guitar, and people that are blonde, and people that are blue-eyed and brown-eyed, and people who are tall and short and this color skin and that color skin have all done things wrong, and still do. Maybe we're here for a test. Maybe we're here to see if we can see through all this, see through the kind of veil of, what would you call it? Could you call it temptation? The temptation to just be angry and then let that stew. And what does that turn into? You go out and maybe, shooting someone else or hurting someone else. How does that help anything? So these are not trivial. They are not easy things to deal with. But if we all do our part, what if? Here's a big, big, big what if. Like I mentioned the number earlier, if there's 7-8 billion people, what if a big chunk would say, we're going to, as hard as it is, despite all the craziness that's going on, we're going to find a way to rise above. What's done is done. We're going to, overcome all the temptation for anger and hate. And, we know we can't go back, but we can go forward. What if we go forward with peace, And what if that's, the fringe minority, and everyone else is like, you don't understand, you don't understand. This is my people are oppressed. And, what if we say, well, hey, we have a majority here. Let's figure something out. Let's figure something out. Because I know in Israel, Arabs and Jews and Muslims. Wait, did I get that right? Yeah. Well, Arabs are usually Muslim, but I meant to say Arabs and Jews and Christians all in some parts of the country all get along. I mean, I've met them. I've seen videos of them. You know, people of different religions can get along. It's usually the radicals that, luckily, you know, I'd like to say, I don't want to say luckily, but it seems to work out that the crazies and the extremists are a pretty small minority. It's a weird dynamic. Thank goodness it's a. I think it would be hell otherwise if it was a majority, right? What if the majority of everyone on the planet was hostile and cut you off in traffic and, you know, gave you the bird? And what if like 90% of the people you met was just really mean and, you know, it'd be a different world, right? But I hope where you are, I know the war is a different story right now, but a lot of the world I think is peaceful, wouldn't you say? Unless you may not have been everywhere, but usually when you hear of things, by and large, it's a small percentage of the population that's at war. It's not the majority. Plus, you'd run out of weapons anyways. How many bullets and grenades and rockets are there? You know, eventually you run out. So what I'm saying is, there's an old saying. Says when people think one or two people can't do anything, I think it's a '60s saying that says, you know, that's really how most groups started. It started with one or two or three people. Think of anything. It's now I'm getting emotional. I don't think I was going. I don't think I didn't think I was going to be, but usually groups start with a few small amount of people. You know, think of anything you've seen in the world, anything in nature, an oak tree or anything, anything you see that grows in nature started incredibly small. Maybe it started with the energy that we didn't even see. You know, an apple seed becoming an apple tree. So if more people start to realize, hey, we are powerful, by the way. This is, I think, the great deception that we have all this abilities and these forces that, you know, we don't know. Most people don't know that you have. You have the ability to set boundaries, and you have the ability to, well, that's, you know, just there's a lot of abilities you have, you know, when you meditate and you do things to evolve, to better yourself, usually you get a little more help to evolve even more. And, you know, and then you can use all of this abilities for good. That's why I like, you know, I like Buddhism. They use the word cultivate. You know, your life is kind of analogous to a garden. You know, you all of a sudden you realize, oh, I have a garden. Oh, great, I get to work on this. I get to, if you like gardens, you know, plant whatever I want. But the state of the garden right now is full of weeds and random stuff and rodents and snakes, and you have to work on it. Just like you work on a garden, you have tools, right? You have a rake and a shovel and hoe and some fertilizer, and there's lots of things you can do to that garden. You can turn a real ugly garden into a beautiful garden. So you can turn your life into, you know, a beautiful garden, and then, you know, you can become an instrument of peace. There we go, from a garden to an instrument, a moving garden, to share your strength and your beauty and your courage and your willingness to share. And I think this is what's on the schedule, guys. I think this is what's on our plate. This is what we are. What's going to happen? What's the plan? This is the plan. I would say the evolution of us is to get through all this and say, oh wow, this is a big mess. You know, every time we fight, you know, sometimes fights bring out the best in people. Sometimes, you know, I haven't had a lot of fights, but I found it's kind of venting and it's cathartic, and, you know, as long as nobody dies or gets seriously hurt, you can get through it. And sometimes that can strengthen a bond. So it's a big mess. I said a lot, but I want to say that there is hope, and we don't have to resort to the simplicity of just A versus B, this side versus that side, because I'm sure if you looked at each side, you'd see, kind of the oh the microcosm of humanity. We have the yin and the yang. We have the ability to be good and evil. We can be honest or deceptive. There are times in our lives, unless we're all angels, that we've done something maybe we're not proud of, or things that we have addictions, or we snap. And but it can be overcome. So hopefully you'll work on yourself and not feed into the simplicity. Obviously, I think the word, again, nuance, I'm not sure if I said it earlier, but nuance is so important. There's sometimes more than just a simple story. Unless you've really seen a small segment of a story, like I said, that the bully and the kid getting picked on, it's usually much more, there's layers, there's layers, and sometimes, it's a little bit of a tug of war, and there's back and forth, and there's bad actors in each group. So take that for what you will. Use the tools available to you. Try to learn about positivity, gaslighting, what that is, and how not to be gaslit, how to prepare. Sometimes, there are other things going on. There's the idea of misdirection, and basically there's a lot of things going on. Sometimes not everything that you see on the news is the most important topic. Okay, so keep that in mind. Stay of good cheer. Be open. Look into all kinds of positive communication techniques. There's ways to communicate with others. There's ways to listen. There's active listening. There's nonviolent communication. There's just so many tools that it's and be careful if you're being triggered. If you're being triggered, sometimes you're being manipulated or played. So don't get too caught up. I mean, if you're there, and you're seeing things with your own two eyes, that can be a different story. But anyways, work on it, and I wanted to share a little bit of what I've seen, and I hope you have something positive to work on and you aspire to positivity. So I'll leave it at that. All right. I do send love to you all, and I hope you all stay well and keep growing. Take care.